Now there's something very profound in that, because as a Muslim, the Quran doesn't even let you believe that Jesus died on the cross. The Quran says in Surah An-Nisa, which is chapter 4, verse 157, وَمَا قَتَلُوهُ وَمَا صَلَبُوهُ وَلَكِنْ شُبِّهَ لَهُمْ. He was not killed, nor was he crucified, but so it appeared to them. So the Quran denies that Jesus was killed by crucifixion. But if you study the history of Jesus' life, I'm not talking about Christians studying the history of Jesus' life. I'm talking about atheist, skeptical, agnostic scholars like Paula Fredrickson, like Marcus Borg, like Bart Ehrman, none of whom are Christians. All of them say, if we can know anything about Jesus' life, it's that he died by crucifixion under Pontius Pilate. The death of Jesus is the most solid fact regarding his life, historically speaking, and that alone challenges the truth of the Quran. And as a Muslim, I had to really wrestle with that.
The disciples truly believed that Jesus had risen from the dead, and according to most historical Jesus scholarship, Christianity wouldn't have gotten off the ground if it weren't for that fact.
You know, the cross was designed to be the most humiliating, the most painful way to die ever in human history. We had to invent a word to describe how painful it is. Excruciating. Excruce means from the cross. When I was saying that Jesus never claimed to be God, I would point to the Gospel of John and I would say, well, John's Gospel was written 60 years after Jesus died. You can't trust John's Gospel. What about the other Gospels? Where do they say Jesus claimed to be God? Well, ultimately I found where in the other Gospels Jesus claimed to be God. It's pretty clear once you read it through the lens of the Old Testament. But I had denied the reliability of John's Gospel because it was written 60 years after Jesus, supposedly. I don't think it is, but that's what people said. You turn to Muhammad's life, the first biography written about Muhammad comes 140 years after he dies. How can I consistently deny the Christian message in light of the way the Islamic evidence works? And so this information was coming to me. I was beginning to realize what I had received was problematic both in terms of its history and in terms of its theology.
So, and James White has brought this up in many debates with you, that if you use reasoning to criticize the Bible, use the same reasoning to criticize the Quran. Be consistent. And that's the thing which made me leave Islam, was when I consistently criticized Islam and Christianity. I found that when you apply the reasoning equally, it's just like we talked about today with Trinity and Tawheed. The words aren't found in either. The theology was developed for hundreds of years in both. These are complex issues in both religions. But Bila Kaif is not as good an answer as Trinity. And so when you compare these equally and we're consistent, that's where things come to light.
And so at that point, I started praying fervently to God, saying, God, can you reveal yourself to me? Can you show me the truth? And you have to understand, Muslims, generally speaking, don't believe Allah communes with us. Not generally speaking, that's just what Islam teaches. Chapter 48, Surah Al-Ankabut says that it is not proper for Allah to reveal himself to you. He remains behind a veil. So what Muslims expect if they want to hear from God is a dream usually. And this is why I think God speaks to Muslims in dreams around the world, especially Muslims who are praying to receive the truth. Am I willing to not just do this to me, but to do this to my mom? And to do this to my dad as the only son in our family? These are the issues I'm wrestling with, and it's hurting, and that's why I'm asking God for more dreams, more visions, asking him to give me more and more. But at a certain point, enough's enough. The Lord stopped giving me more, and so that's when I realized I had to do what I had to do. But I couldn't quite do it. Like I said, I met David my freshman year of college. By this point, I was in my second year of grad school. So this took years to get to this point. And as I was driving to school one day, I just started bawling. I just started crying. And I said, God, I know what I have to do, but I need time to mourn. I need time to mourn. I do think that there is enough evidence in this world for us to conclude that God exists. I think it is the most rational conclusion. But how much can we know about God after that point? I think revelation is necessary to know the deeper things about God, and this is one of them, that God is three in one. We have eternity to worship God in bliss. We have eternity to live joyfully without pain. We have this short life, a blink of an eye, to preach Christ. My aunt passed away 2 days ago. Right when I landed here, I found out that she passed away. She lives in Cambridge. Lived in Cambridge. She's been in Cambridge since the 70s. She's been in our backyard here. I don't think anyone shared the gospel with her. She's Muslim.
And so I said, okay, I can't rely on Muhammad then. Maybe I have to rely on the inspiration of the Quran. Because Muslims believe in the Shahada. In order to become Muslim, you have to believe in the Shahada, which is La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger. So there's no God but Allah, and I tried to defend that through the Quran, and Muhammad is his messenger. I tried to defend that by investigating his life. This part didn't work, so I then turned to the Quran, and I started saying, well, the Quran must be the word of God. And I went to all the apologetic reasons that I'd been given from childhood as to why the Quran is the word of God. I'd been told the Quran had never changed. I'd been told that the Quran had miracles inside it, miraculous scientific knowledge. I'd been told that the Quran had prophecies of the future. And as I began to investigate each and every single one of these claims, again, with the same critical eye that I used on Christianity, it began to crumble.
Chapter 9 of the Quran is the last major chapter of the Quran to have been composed, and it is the most expansively violent. This is the one that starts off by saying, this is a disavowal of all the treaties we have with polytheists. Chapter 9, verse 5, slay the infidels wherever you find them, lay siege to them, take them captive. Chapter 9, verse 29, fight the Jews and Christians until they pay you the poll tax and they feel subdued. Why? Chapter 9, verse 33, Islam has been made to prevail over every religion. So, I mean, chapter 9 is the most violent. It's the culmination of the Islamic message. It's the marching orders that Muhammad leaves Muslims with, which is why when he dies, Muslims conquer 1/3 of the known world within 150 years.
Right.
These were the messages.
By the sword.
Well, it's complex. Once again, they would tell places, if you do not convert, then you have the option to pay a tax. And if you don't pay that tax, then we will fight you.
The jizya.
Exactly. I honestly didn't know about these verses because when Muslims read the Quran, most of them are not Arabs. The Quran is written in Arabic. Less than 20% of the Muslim world is Arab. And those who are Arab speakers speak Amiya. They speak colloquial forms of Arabic. They don't speak the classical Quranic Arabic. And so we didn't understand a lot of these texts unless our teachers told us about them. So it turns out that there were many things in the Quran I hadn't been told. For example, when people challenged me, is Islam a religion of peace? I would say, La ikraha fi din. Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter 2 of the Quran, verse 256 says, La ikraha fi din. There's no compulsion in religion. So of course Islam's a religion of peace. Look what the Quran says. There's no compulsion in religion. Or I would quote Surah Al-Kafirun, Qul ya ayyuhal kafirun la'abudun ta'budun. Say to the disbelievers, O you who disbelieve, but basically those of you who aren't Muslim, you can believe what you want to believe. I do not worship what you worship. You don't worship what I worship, but that's okay. We can get along, basically, is what the chapter says. Peaceful message. Those were the verses I knew. What I didn't know were verses like chapter 9, verse 5. Slay the infidel wherever you find them, lay siege to them and take them captive. That's in the Quran too. Verses like, fight the Jews and Christians until they pay the ransom tax and feel humiliated. I didn't know about that verse either.
I was raised believing that Islam was a religion of peace. That's why when 9/11 happened, it shook me to the core. I was just shocked when 9/11 happened. I said, how can people attack innocent human beings in the name of Allah, who is a peaceful God?
The first 13 years of Islam, no battles are fought. No wars. This was a peaceful time with peaceful messages, but he only had 115 followers or so during that time. In the last 9 to 10 years of his life is when he had power, when he had a city under his control. And it was during that time that we see battles increasingly fought. In fact, at a rate of 9 battles per year, 86 before he dies.